At least 37 gold miners died and many others were injured in the Central African Republic when a pit in which they were working on collapsed after heavy rains, according to the president's office. The incident happened on Sunday at a gold mine in Ndasima, which is located 440 kilometers east of the capital, Bangui. The government has declared 3 days of national mourning and rescue efforts continue. The Central African Republic, which is a former French colony, is rich in gold and diamonds, but the country has endured decades of instability, with rebels sweeping from the north of the country to topple the president in March of this year. A stream of relatives and politicians continued to visit the Mediclinic Heart Hospital in Pretoria, where a critically ill Nelson Mandela is being treated. Nelson Mandela's ex-wife, Winnie Madikizela Mandela, and his daughters, Zinzi Mandela and Zinani Mandela, were among those who flocked to the hospital on Monday. Their visits came amid heightened fears for his health. South African President Jacob Zuma said in an address televised to the world and an anxious nation that Mandela was in a critical condition and that the doctors are doing everything possible to ensure his well-being and comfort. Mr. Mandela was admitted 17 days ago for a recurring lung infection. Well, in the villages of Mvezo and Kunu in South Africa's Eastern Cape province, where Nelson Mandela grew up, many people say they do not want to think about South Africa or a world without Nelson Mandela. CCTV's Rene Delcam has the story.
In the village of Mvezo, where Nelson Rolihlahla Mandela was born on the 18th of July 1918, and the neighboring village of Kunu across the Mbasha River, where Madiba spent most of his childhood, people were shocked to hear that his health had deteriorated and he was now fighting for his life in his hospital bed in Pretoria.
God, help us to stay with Mandela, the King of the Kings. Take away the pain from his body. Please keep Mandela with us for a long time.
And I'm very heartbroken that he is still in the hospital, very sick. Unfortunately, if God takes him, we wish his spirit to get rest.
I feel sad because he is one of our heroes, a legend. So we could feel ashamed when losing him, but we just have to let go because it's been long.
Most South Africans and people around the world agree that Nelson Mandela has more than played his part in building and reconciling the new South African nation. And his work as a selfless democratic leader is done. Professor William Gumede, who wrote the introduction to the book Nelson Mandela, No Easy Walk to Freedom, says the former statesman could be compared to George Washington, the founding father of the United States.
He was a groundbreaking father figure of the nation, and that's Nelson Mandela. I mean, Nelson Mandela set the standard, the democratic standard for the way we should behave politically, for his kind of inclusiveness, his reconciliation, his non-racialism. I mean, I think for generations to come, Mandela's golden standard that he set, for the kind of democracy that we want to build, we as a South Africa want to build, the kind of inclusiveness that we must strive for as a nation, the kind of South Africanness. And for me, the other great part of Mandela, he gave us dignity and he gave us a sense of pride.
And it's clear that Nelson Mandela's common touch affected almost everyone, even the littlest kids of Kunu, where he himself played as a child. Rene Delcam, CCTV, Kunu.
Well, let's get the latest on Mr. Mandela's health situation, and the CCTV's Guy Henderson joins us live from Pretoria. Guy, it's been a rather tense and concerning time for South Africa there. What is the latest from the presidency about Mr. Mandela's health?
As you can probably see live now, we have a group of athletes appear to be turning up to lay tributes to Nelson Mandela, who remains in the hospital behind me, and tributes have been constantly pouring in for the now well over 2 weeks that Mr. Mandela has been in hospital. Just to let viewers know, also in the last few minutes, we've just seen what I counted as 5 American military helicopters A reminder of, despite the fact that Mr. Mandela remains critically ill in this hospital behind me, it does look likely that President Barack Obama is likely to make his state visit to South Africa later this week. So in terms of the an official health update, well, we haven't had that since this press briefing on Monday by the presidency when they confirmed that he was still in a critical condition. We've had various family members over the last few days, as you say, continuing to visit. I think we can expect more today. I can also confirm that down in the Eastern Cape in Kunu this morning, various members of the Mandela family are also undergoing a meeting in Kunu in the Eastern Cape. Now, Kunu, for viewers who don't know, is the place where Nelson Mandela spent actually relatively few years of his childhood, living with his mother, working on the land as a cattle herd. But it's somewhere that he always saw as home, despite the fact that he spent many decades away from it in prison. And it is seen as the place where he has let be known in the past that he would like to be laid to rest, whenever that is. So family members there believe to be discussing what they've described as a sensitive issue.
Guy, there have been some updates, though, on Mr. Mandela's health in the past couple of days. But do the people, though, still trust what they're hearing about Mr. Mandela's health situation?
Well, it is a tense time here in South Africa for government, for the family, obviously, for the media as well, and to some extent the wider public. And that has meant that at various times some issues and some tensions have arisen, as we saw at this press briefing on Monday. On the one hand, you had the presidential spokesman, Mac Maharaj, accusing some media, he said, of unethical reporting of some of the medical details of Mr. Mandela. On the other hand, you had journalists asking Mr. Mac Maharaj, the presidential spokesman, really pressing him as to why the presidency felt deemed it not necessary to let the public know that Mr. Mandela's hospital. So those two competing principles of, on the one hand, the public's right to know something that may be deemed in the public interest, and on the other hand, the right to the privacy of the patient when it comes to those medical details. Now, if you speak to the public, I think the sense I've got is that they seem to echo the views expressed by the family, which is that they should be afforded some privacy, and Mr. Mandela should be afforded some privacy and some dignity, even perhaps at the expense of a public interest that Mr. Nelson Mandela has spent most of his life, of course, dedicated to.
All right, CCTV's Guy Henderson joining us there from Pretoria. To Mali now, where army representatives made their first official visit on Sunday to the country's northern town of Kidal in more than a year. The visit is meant for talks to determine how the Malian army and security forces can return to the north. The mission was part of a ceasefire accord known as the Ouagadougou Agreement, which was signed between Mali's government and Tuareg separatist rebels last week. The accord paves the way for the Malian government troops to return to the rebel-held northern town ahead of a planned election in July of this year. Bamako has made it clear that it wants its civilian administration and army reinstated in the rebel stronghold before elections are scheduled for the 28th of July, which are meant to complete a democratic transition after the March 2012 coup.
They have a good base for us to continue to advance, to not delay, to respect the politics. And I think if we each put a strong effort, things will go faster. It will advance.
And here's what's coming up on Africa Live. Quoting the continent, US President Barack Obama set to begin his major tour of Africa. U.S. President Barack Obama begins his first major tour of Africa Wednesday. And as he journeys through Senegal, South Africa and Tanzania, touting trade, investment and the developmental benefits of democracy, he aims to fix the perception that he has given the region little attention in the past. CCTV's Maria Galang has more.
When Barack Obama won the election in 2008 and again in 2012, there was jubilation across much of Africa. The first black US president would, many assumed, give special focus to the world's poorest continent. But as he prepares to embark on a three-nation visit to Africa, Obama stands accused of ceding diplomatic and economic ground in Africa.
Applauding and encouraging, supporting democratic institutions, doing more to highlight the importance of trade and investment in economic growth, and putting a special emphasis not on the past, but on Africa's future.
China overtook America in 2009 as Africa's largest trade partner, and with the continent home to several of the world's fastest-growing economies, Obama's critics say he has missed a golden economic opportunity. The US president has visited sub-Saharan Africa before, declaring on a trip to Ghana in 2009 that he had Africa's blood in his veins. And yet from the outset, his approach has been clear, that African problems require African solutions. Many concede that it was perhaps unrealistic to expect an African-American president to produce a radically different Africa policy.
It's good that people can see in Obama a kind of symbol of a black man who has succeeded. That's the American dream. But there also has to be an African dream. Men have to be strong and hold themselves with dignity rather than not being independent.
There is one glaring omission on Obama's itinerary: Kenya, where his late father was born and where he still has living relatives. Nonetheless, Obama will seek to show that the US ties with Africa run deeper than trade alone, and that his country remains the continent's key partner. Maria Galang, CCTV.
Well, let's head now to the continent's north, where a group of young Egyptians launched the self-styled rebellion movement nearly 2 months ago. They have amassed millions of signatures supporting a withdrawal of confidence in President Mohamed Morsi. And this weekend, they will lead protests to demand President Morsi steps down. But does this rebellion carry any legal weight? Adel Mahroui tells us more.
The rebellion campaign surpassed most expectations when it announced on Sunday that it had amassed 15 million signatures. That's 2 million more than the votes Mohamed Morsi won when he was elected president last year. Symbolically, that may be significant, but Morsi's supporters say the signatures have no legal merit.
First of all, there is nothing in the Constitution or legal that states signatures could replace the law. This is only a political approach with a legal or constitutional basis. Legally, the president is elected for 4 years and would only leave through elections or other elected bodies like the parliament.
Others, though, are not so sure.
The Constitution states that the people are the source for legislation. They choose and elect bodies. But as we are in a special circumstance, which is the absence of parliament, with this, legitimacy returns to the people, and the rebellion campaign is a way to express the people's desires. Therefore, it could be considered a constitutional method, but the Supreme Court must have the final say in that.
Islamists say there is no alternative but for Morsi to continue his 4-year term as the constitution states. Yet some argue that there are other options.
In our constitution, Article 226 is a transitional article that states how to transfer power from the executive elected authority. If the president is meant to stay for 4 years without any interruption, or with no need to remove him earlier, then we would have had the need to make this article in the new constitution.
But even if the president can leave power early, some question the credibility of the signatures.
With judicial supervision and NGO statement of its integrity, some doubted the presidential election results and accused it of being manipulated. So what about the rebellion signatures that have been gathered in the streets without supervision at all? This is why they are useless.
We will go to the Supreme Court with the signatures to have a final word in this legal debate. It cannot justify the legality of the rebellion campaign unless it is confident that all the signatures are authentic and the information in the application is verified.
Legal experts don't agree on whether the signatures carry legal weight. But what is apparent is that their political background is a factor of analysis. Legal or not, the opposition is still proceeding with the June 30th protest aiming to oust the president. And the Islamists are not just continuing their rallies against it, they're gathering signatures for the president as well. Adel Mahroui, CCTV, Cairo.